You are looking at the best closer this city has ever seen.
Closer, huh? Baseball?
Attorney, I close situations.
What if I told you that I consume knowledge like no one you've ever met and I've actually passed the bar? I'd say you're full of crap.
And, lucky you, I have room for one more student. Think of me as Yoda. Only instead of being little and green, I wear suits and I'm awesome. I'm your bro. I'm Broda. Okay, meet me at the bar in 15 minutes and suit up! Suit up! You suited up! Birthday suiting up. Slut up! Suit up! Suit up! Suit it up! Suit up! Suit up! Space suit up! Not suit up!
Welcome to Suit Up with the best dressed man in radio, where sports is a business. Let's talk about it. Here on Peyton Sports Network, Chicagoland Sports Radio, here at the Illinois Center for Broadcasting. If you want a career in broadcasting, go to beonair.com. Be a part of the many great professionals that have joined the journalistic profession going through this place. It's time for some opening statements, people.
All rise. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Opening statements here on Suit Up, Best Dressed Man in Radio. Yours truly, Xavier Pope. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. We have an action-packed show today. I want to, in the light of the National Labor Relations Board ruling that Northwestern players can form unions, thought this was the perfect show to talk about all the implications of that ruling, but also the many different ways that it's currently being used to compensate college athletes. Before I jump right into that, make sure you follow me on Twitter. That's EXAVIERPOPE. And follow my man next to me. He's my producer. I call him Picasso of the board, Sean Davis. Follow him at Sean M. Davis 1.
That boy got God-given talent.
He sure does. And we believe this is going to be one of our best shows. As a matter of fact, I say now that it's probably going to be our best show. A lot of guests on this show. We want to really dig into the topic. It's probably one of the most important issues in the sports world to this day. So I have a gigantic lineup. We have ESPN writer, author, League of Denial, Steve Finaru. You have sports arbitration attorney Jay Reslinger, who will be joining me shortly. We also have former ESPN sports business reporter Christy Dosh, Sportonomics host Morgan Campbell. Plus, we'll have lead counsel for NCAA concussion cases, Joe Sippert, a good friend of mine. And we'll also read a statement sent to our show from NCAA antitrust litigations lead counsel Jeffrey Kessler, who also headed up Tom Brady versus the NFL. ESPN's Myron Metcalf joins us in the 9 o'clock hour to discuss the Final Four, and we're going to rip him about Kentucky, as well as Joel Corey to discuss racism, sports, and the Eagles cutting Deshaun Jackson. Is that enough for you, big guy? Let's get it done. First, we have Jay Rislinger. He is an impressive man. I heard about a lot of articles that he contributed to, and I just thought that it was necessary to bring on his expertise on the show. Thank you for joining the best dressed man in radio on Suit Up, Jay. How are you this evening?
I'm great, Xavier. How are you doing?
I am absolutely fantastic. I'm extremely excited to talk about one of the most important issues of our day, Jay, and we've heard a lot from you on this. Most recently, you stated that you believe that Congress will potentially step in. Let's step back for a second. We know that Kane Coulter and the rest of the guys from CAPA, the College Athletes Player Association, will be going to D.C. On Wednesday and Thursday to meet about possible legislation that will help push along to get athletes paid. What say you on that, Jay, as far as the strategic maneuvering immediately after the National Labor Relations Board ruling for the Northwestern players?
Well, look, I mean, Congress has never met a media issue it didn't want to take on, and any time that our elected officials can get their name in the paper and their face on TV, they're gonna jump into the fray. And so this is a perfect opportunity for them to do so, because it's something that their constituents actually pay attention to. They pay more attention to things like sports, et cetera, than they do actually, how my roads are getting fixed or how my bridges are getting paved. Right. So it's tangible to the constituents. So that's why they like to sink their teeth into issues such as this. But believe it or not, as much as I don't like Congress getting their hands into sports, because I don't think it works very well, this may be a good opportunity to start the process for brokering some type of compromise between the NCAA athletes and the NCAA itself.
Interesting. Do you believe that there's going to be any traction as far as legislation? And I mean, how long do you think something like that will take?
Well, I'm not sure that they're going to get any traction out of legislation, but you don't need legislation to push the issue along. What you need is the threat of legislation. You saw back in 2005 how Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association, when Congress started sniffing into their joint drug agreement, how they quickly decided that, look, the things that we can control, it's much better if we can control them than if Congress steps in. So if we make the changes to keep them off our back, things will go a lot smoother for us. And so the threat of legislation is actually, sometimes more effective than actually legislation itself.
Jay, now you've raised some really interesting points. As we saw with the MLB and the joint drug agreement, we had different high-profile people come in front of Congress. If this were to happen with the NCAA, is Mark Emmert going to be called in front of Congress to talk about payment for athletes? Will a high-profile coach, will Kane Coates and the rest of the Kappa guys go out in front?
Well, see, that's the best part of it. I represented Sammy Sosa in 2005 in front of Congress in those steroid hearings, and it's not will they, it's, they have to, because they get subpoenaed, and they have subpoena power in Congress. They can subpoena documents, they can subpoena people, and so when they tell you you have to be there, you have to be there. You saw today in the news how the GM executives are getting grilled over the recalls of certain parts. That is what will happen to Mark Emmert and other officials from the NCAA, people from, the Big 12, the SEC, the Big East. Those people will have to come and start explaining their books and start explaining their revenues, their profit margins, and how these athletes aren't benefiting, and how these athletes are actually, treated, punished, when they attempt to transfer, et cetera. So it could make for a very ugly day for the NCAA and other college officials if they do get subpoenaed before Congress.
Once again, we're talking to Jay Resinger. He's a sports attorney based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's represented athletes in crisis management, disciplinary proceedings, salary arbitration, and litigation matters. And we just heard he represented Sammy Sosa in the recent hearings on Congress. Tell us a little bit more about that process, and how do you think maybe current athletes maybe become a part of what's going on in Congress? Do you think that current athletes, Kane he's out of the system, current athletes stepping up and being public faces of this as well?
Yeah, look, I think, the nice part about being in the NCAA is these guys face very little risk of retribution from their schools. It's not like you're going to get benched or cut, if you stand up and say what you believe with respect to an NCAA matter. I mean, that differs a little bit, when you start getting into the professional ranks. So I think these guys have little to lose, and I think you will see some people stand up, some athletes stand up and start being counted amongst those that are supportive of this issue. But it takes education. A lot of the athletes, at different institutions throughout the country right now, aren't really up to speed on what these guys are trying to do, what Kane Coulter and the rest of these other guys are trying to do with respect to this issue. So I think as they get slowly educated on the process and what they're really trying to accomplish, which isn't really compensation for athletes as much as it is protection for athletes. And I think when they look at that, they will want to stand up and be counted, and it will. I think there'll be an influx of athletes that are openly supporting it. Interesting.
Once again, we're joined by Jay Resinger. He is a sports attorney based in Pittsburgh, PA, represented Sammy Sosa in the recent hearings in Congress as relates to the joint drug agreement there. I wanted to ask about, we talked about legislation. I wanted to read a quick piece of the statement from the legislator that's going to be meeting with Kane Coulter and the rest of the guys from the College Athletic Players Association, Jan Schakowsky. She states that I'm pleased with the NLRB ruling that correctly recognizes Northwestern football players as university employees. These young men dedicate 40-plus hours a week for much of the school year to football program, and they deserve rights to unionize. Northwestern is a model for ensuring that its athletes can succeed both on the field and in the classroom with a 97% graduation rate that ranks in the highest of the country among Division I programs. However, just because they're a good employer doesn't mean they're not an employer. Powerful words there, Jay.
Absolutely. But, is Northwestern going to say that they're responsible for a kid that suffers a career-ending injury, during one of its competitions, that they'll take care of that kid for life, that he's protected under workers' compensation laws? No, they won't. I mean, they could be the greatest employer ever, but they have no obligation to do so, nor will they promise any student-athlete the same. I mean, that's why take a look at what they've done in California, where they have the student-athletes bill of protection, and what that tried to accomplish, and what it is accomplishing, requiring larger institutions to guarantee that they won't interfere with transfers, to guarantee that they will be covered healthcare-wise if they suffer an injury that lingers past their college eligibility, or requirements that kids be offered 4-year scholarships and not just the year-to-year basis that every other scholarship is offered on. So it's not just the compensation issue. It's more about the protection of the student-athlete than anything else.
Awesome stuff there, Jay. Jay Resinger, sports arbitration attorney, joining the best-dressed man in radio, yours truly, on Suit Up. Thank you once again for suiting up with me. I look forward to having you on the program once again, Jay. Thanks again.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and have a great show.
Thank you so much. We are just carving this thing up. I told Sean, my producer, that I'm going to carve up the issues like deli meat, and we're getting into it after the break. 8:20. We just have so much going on. Morgan Campbell, Sportonomics host. We also have Christy Dosh joining me. We're going to dig a little bit into the arguments that won it for Northwestern. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. We're talking about players getting paid. Do you think they should get paid? How should they get paid? We're also talking to Joe Siprit. He is the lead counsel for the NCAA concussion litigation case. You heard a little bit of that in Jay's piece, as well as Steve Finaro, League of Denial, a writer and ESPN senior writer. To that time, brush your shoulders off, check your timepiece, and suit up.
Check my timepiece, brush my shoulders off. Welcome back to Suit Up, Paid Sports Network, ChicagolandSportsRadio.com.
Welcome back to Suit Up with the best dressed man in radio. Yours truly, Xavier Pope, where sports is a business. Let's talk about it. Peyton Sports Network, Chicagoland Sports Radio. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. Do you think college athletes should be paid? In what way should they be paid? How long do you think it's going to take? And does it affect other aspects of college sports? We're really, really digging into it. I said we're going to be slicing it up like deli meat. Joining me to talk about the specifics of the National Labor Relations Board ruling, I have Morgan Campbell. He's Sportonomics host. He's a National Newspaper Award winner. He's also a Northwestern alum. Also joining me is Christy Dosh. We've shared an agent, actually. She covers the sports biz for Campus Insider, and she's formerly with ESPN and Forbes. Thank you both for joining the best dressed man in radio. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Hey, good evening, Xavier. And I don't know if I'm the best dressed man out there, but I think you and I cool neck and neck in terms of cool ties.
Okay.
You've seen Sportonomics. You know my tie game is always on point.
Okay, so I have to check your Instagram out so I can check it out, so I can start seeing tie for tie, pocket square for pocket square. I will be checking you out, Mr. Campbell. So first, I want to toss the question over to Christy. We had a really interesting discussion on Twitter a few days ago, which prompted us to get in contact with you. It's really great to hear different perspectives on sports issues, and that's why it's important to have diverse voices in sports. And when the NLRB ruling came out, not as many people discussed Title IX implications. Tell me a little bit about your analysis of how do you think the NLRB ruling will affect Title IX, and what steps can be taken in the future to account for the Title IX difference?
So this was something I looked into a couple of years ago when I was researching for a book I wrote about the business side of college football, Saturday Millionaires, and I talked to about half a dozen Title IX experts around the country, and the one thing I can tell you they agreed on is that they don't agree on anything. I really got 6 pretty different opinions. There were certainly things here and there that they agreed on, but one of the things I think that is unique about Title IX and that really has to be taken into consideration is just how volatile Title IX can be. I mean, I don't think most people realize, well, first of all, I run into fans who don't realize that Title IX is federal law. I run into fans who think that it is an NCAA rule. It is federal law. And anyone can bring a Title IX action. And I think that's what makes it sort of scary for universities and for athletic departments, because, you know, you or I could go on a campus next week and think we see something that looks like it's not equal treatment, call up the Office of Civil Rights, and, you know, that could lead to a Title IX investigation. And that's why I think athletic departments are very careful about what they do and in making it, you know, the equal treatment obvious. And that's why when we start talking about compensating perhaps football student athletes at Northwestern and not the other athletes at Northwestern, it becomes an issue, because there is not only a formula for Title IX, a mathematical formula, but there's also a number of factors they look at beyond the simple math. So it's certainly something that has to be taken into consideration as we move forward with this.
Morgan, we're talking about the implications of it with Title IX, but we also have some business implications of it. We all know that there's been money given under the table to athletes over the course of the years. And I think that the new system of unionizing players actually helps regulate an underbelly of college sports that no one really wants to talk about, a dirty little secret. You have boosters paying players, and a lot of them aren't brought into light. Teams have already won championships, like you saw at USC, or Derrick Rose already in the National Basketball Association. What say you about particularly taking everything and legalizing it all so that you don't have the unnecessary payments and guys having to send at Northwestern upperclassmen money home from the stipend that's meant for their apartment and sending it back home to help their families?
I think it's important to remember, first, that you know, this movement to unionize at Northwestern, the players aren't asking, like, one of the union's demands, one of the proposed union's demands isn't, you know, like a whole lot of money. They're not saying, cut us in on this $30 million of revenue that you guys said that you guys made last year on the basis of us playing football. They're just saying, hey, tuition covers most costs, but there's a cost of living beyond that, and then there's even a cost of living beyond that, so let's make sure that everything we're compensated matches with the cost of going to college. You know, there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction saying, well, these guys are asking to be paid. And if you ask me, I think they should be paid. For precisely that reason. And when you get to the point where, because the obvious next question is, well, if football players on scholarship are getting paid, why shouldn't field hockey get paid? Why shouldn't men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse, rowing, why shouldn't they get paid? But again, just using the criteria laid out in the National Labor Relations Board ruling, the fact that college football and men's basketball are commercial enterprises in the way that other college sports are not, justifies the payment. So if you say, well, why should I pay a football player instead of a track sprinter, instead of a gymnast? Well, because the football player is involved in a commercial enterprise and the lacrosse player is not.
Interesting, Christy. Now, this makes me think of now Title IX, the rub could be these guys have fought the way to collectively bargain, and we know that different unions in different professional sports, like MLB versus the National Football League, the union's relative strength. So not having necessarily the amount of revenue, maybe you might have a Northwestern women's volleyball team, a DePaul lacrosse team, and collectively bargaining, but not necessarily having the power, say, to really negotiate much more than, say, we get to have uniforms and we get to have our tuition paid.
Yeah, And I still think that Title IX comes into play there. I think the only real scenario where Title IX might not come into play is if we're talking about student athletes making money through more of an Olympic model with sponsorships, endorsements, that sort of thing. The Title IX experts I spoke with sort of disagreed about whether that would fall under the purview of Title IX or not, but certainly any sort of money coming from the university or the athletics department would fall under Title IX. And so as soon as this decision came out, one of my first thoughts was it's hard to picture down the road that Congress won't have to get involved in this somehow. And clearly, Congress has bigger, more important things on a national scale, I think, to deal with. But because of Title IX, I think they're going to end up having to get involved because they're either going to have to redefine Title IX in order to allow these sorts of things happen, even if it's just a stipend, even if we're not talking going to, salaried employees and that type of thing. So I really believe down the road they will have to step in and say, either Title IX applies here or it doesn't. Or, they could step in and say, that's it, student athletes are not employees. They can sort of overrule the National Labor Relations Board. So it'll be interesting to see how and when they get involved.
Interesting. Once again, we're talking to Christy Dosh, formerly ESPN and Forbes, and also the author of Saturday Millionaires, and a pretty darn smart attorney, if you ask me. And then Morgan Campbell, who's Sportonomics host, and now challenging me in my suit game. We'll have to see about that.
That's a suit game, just a tie game.
The tie game? Okay, I got you. So my thing is, no one saw this ruling coming for Northwestern except for the best-dressed man in radio, yours truly, Xavier Pope. I've been talking about it on my show for the last 2 months, breaking down as to why the analysis is so simple. It's basic agency law, and no one seemed to have thought that. And it's amazing that everyone was blindsided. Do you think, I think that the student-athlete fiction that was created by the NCAA almost stood up as a pseudo-law, keeping everyone from really challenging it. And because everyone did the same thing over and over again over a course of years, and everyone's getting to college, trying to go pro, and it was just a system. Do you think that played a role into everyone, even including the entire national media, completely being blindsided by this ruling, Morgan?
Yeah, well, excuse me, I was talking to a professor at Northwestern about this the other day. He was speaking off the record, but I can speak on the record about what I thought, and it's amazing, when you get around, you ask people, why student athletes, especially in football and men's basketball, why they shouldn't be paid. And you talk about the dollar figures that are being thrown around March Madness. What is it, $771 billion a year? I can't remember. I'm sure Christian will know the dollar figure around the BCS. Why these guys shouldn't be paid, and above and beyond, because that's the way it's always been. I have a hard time hearing, logical answers about why the main players, the main attraction in a commercial enterprise, the people who generate and contribute the most value to the commercial enterprise should not be paid in cash. And when someone says to me, well, they get paid in scholarships, that's fine. But why can't they get paid in scholarships and cash? Like why? And I haven't heard, a logical reason. Every reason I hear, as you said, is either based on sentimental factors or reflex. But again, when you look at this objectively, there's no limit on what the coaches make. No one's saying I'm not paying Mike Krzyzewski in books and tuition, and room and board. He gets cash. And I have a tough time thinking, and I used to think the same way too, but now the more I think of it, and the more college sports, especially men's basketball and football, become a business, the less logical case there is for players not to get paid.
Last question to Christy. Something that no one's really talking about a lot is the difference between public and private employers. People give that distinction, just kind of toss it to the side. But I believe it's probably one of the bigger issues that will cause a giant fight with the right to work laws in over 20 states that pretty much was implemented with the Tea Party reform and coming in. You saw battles in Wisconsin as far as public employees, and you see many of the battles will probably take place where there's big-time college football, Big 12, SEC. And so what do you think about that battle as far as going from state to state to establish the rights to collectively bargain for the employees of those member schools?
That really does make this a mess because the National Labor Relations Board can only rule with regards to the private universities. And so student-athletes at public universities will have to go to their individual states. And like you said, there are 24 states that are right-to-work states. Some of those prohibit collective bargaining. Some of them greatly reduce an employee's ability to collectively bargain. I mean, there will be states where this won't be allowed, and so you'll have student athletes being treated, even just within football, being treated very differently across the country. And if that's the case, if this ruling stands, I think the NCAA has to step in and try to come to some sort of settlement agreement, whatever you want to call it, that would impact student athletes across the country and keep everybody on a level playing field, because the recruiting implications of having private universities being able to offer this when public universities cannot would be huge, I would think.
Last words, Morgan?
Yeah, well, it's funny Christy brought that up because that was my first thought. You know, if I was Northwestern, if I was Reese Northwestern's football team, I don't know if I would fight this. I don't know if I would fight this. If I'm the only team in the Big Ten that can say to somebody, hey, look, we can offer you cash. Our players are unionized. We can offer you cash to meet the cost of living. And we can offer you expanded medical care. You probably won't make the NFL. You're much more likely to suffer some injury that's going to follow you beyond your college years. We can cover you. University of Illinois can't. You make the choice.
Absolutely. Great. Once again, Morgan Campbell, host of Sportonomics, and Christy Dodge, sports business reporter and author of Saturday Millionaires. Thank you for coming on and talking about the NLRB issues with the best dressed man in radio, yours truly, Xavier Pope. Fantastic conversation. I look forward to having you guys again on some time.
Anytime, Xavier.
Thanks again. Wow. That was good stuff. Coming up after the break, we're also going to dig into the NCAA concussion side of it. There's a suit going on in the NCAA going on, the concussions, and no one is talking about this, once again, except for yours truly, the best dressed man in radio, Xavier Pope. The lead counsel for the NCAA concussion case, Joe Siprit, joins me, as well as League of Denial author and ESPN's Steve Fenaru, to talk about the little piece of the NFL settlement that applies directly to the NCAA litigation. Join me on the other side. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. Brush your shoulders off. Check your timepiece. Suit up!
Welcome back to Suit Up. Peyton Sports Network, ChicagolandSportsRadio.com.
Welcome back to Suit Up with the best dressed man in radio, yours truly, Xavier Pope, where sports is a business. Let's talk about it. I told you guys that we are slicing it up like deli meat, like needling it down, because I really believe that fans have not been really given the proper perspective and the long-range implications from a business standpoint, from a legal standpoint, of all the issues regarding athlete compensation. Whether it's first we've got into it from the legislative side, talking to Jay Resinger, with Kane Coulter and the College Athlete Players Association going to D.C., and then we also talked about the NLRB ruling and the implications of that. Now let's jump to another issue. Did you guys know that the NCAA is now being sued for concussions, just like the National Football League was being sued? No, you haven't really heard a lot about it because it hasn't gotten a lot of media coverage. But guess where it gets coverage on? With the best dressed man in radio, yours truly, Xavier Pope. And I am joined by two of the smartest men that I know. Joining me to talk about this is lead counsel for the NCAA concussion case, Joe Siprit, a great friend of mine. And matter of fact, I'm the best dressed man in radio, but that guy might be the best dressed lawyer I know. And then we also are joined by Steve Fenaru. He is the co-author of League of Denial, and he's joined our show several times. He's the ESPN, the magazine senior writer. And thank you guys for joining the best dressed man in radio, yours truly, Xavier Pope, on Suit Up. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, Xavier.
Xavier, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So I've talked to you, Steve, about the connection between the NFL's concussion settlement agreement and the NCAA current litigation being led up by Joe. And part of that concussion settlement, and a lot of people didn't see this, and it was rejected by Anita Brody, was, I'm thinking about another case, was the fact that you had to opt out of litigation against the NCAA in regards to concussions. Something smells fishy there. How do you think that relates specifically maybe to the NCAA concussion case, Steve?
Well, I think it would affect it. It would affect it greatly because I think one of the issues that's always been present in the NFL legal situation is sort of when did people suffer the brain damage that's being discovered, and it was always thought that would be an issue for the plaintiffs going forward, in terms of their case, and that was, in fact, one of the reasons why the proposed settlement came about. And so there's been an expectation that some of those people might get sucked into the NCAA suit or get involved in it. And so if I think the perception is that clause got into the settlement at the request of the NFL so that they could immunize themselves against further litigation. It raised a lot of questions, and as you noted, it was cited by the judge when she rejected the initial proposed settlement. And when they refile that proposed settlement, I'll be surprised if it's still in there, but I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I would definitely be surprised, Steve. And Joe, tell us a little bit about the case that you're heading up. And we know that it wasn't until 2010 the NCAA even implemented a concussion management plan. So obviously late to the party. So give us the specifics of the case and where it stands now.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we filed the case about 3 years ago, and as you mentioned earlier, it flew under the radar for a couple years, and really only in the last, I would say, 6 months has the case started getting traction in the media, to the point where people now realize that it's not only out there, but that the case by its terms really threatens to change college sports as we know it. And I say threatens, but that's not the right word because that's a bad word. I mean, we want to do something good here and positive. And so, I think from the NCAA's perspective, maybe they view the case as a threat to the landscape in terms of concussion management. And what we're basically saying is, look, the NCAA knew for years and years not only about the concussion issue, but about ways to mitigate the problem or ways to manage the risk that we accept as being inherent to the sport. And it was only until 2010 that the NCAA finally acted on some level. And the problem, Xavier, is that what many people don't realize is that all the 2010 plan really says is every member school has to adopt their own plan. So the NCAA purported to act in 2010, but really did nothing more than punt down to the schools. And in some ways, that's even worse because it creates the perception that the NCAA has actually acted when, in fact, it still has not.
Absolutely. Great points there, Joe. And I wanted to drill that down a little bit further. One of the things you talked about and legal fans was that that NFL players, they at least are represented by agents. They have lobbying through a union. We talked about the NLRB ruling that they can become unions, and this may not necessarily be an issue in the future. But right now, it is as far as past concussion knowledge by the NCAA. Doesn't that play a big role into the responsibilities that they had to some of the players? Or all of them, actually?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, in my estimation, I think the NCAA concussion problem is infinitely worse than the NFL problem for a lot of different reasons. Chief of which is that, these are supposed to be kids playing a sport for fun. And, there's so much money involved with, the revenue that the sports generate and scholarships and so forth that sometimes people lose sight of that. But, I mean, fundamentally, these are not professionals making a living or plying a trade. They are kids supposed to be getting an education. And so in a situation like that, in the NFL, by contrast, you've got agents, you've got lawyers, you've got unions, you've got people who are supposed to be looking out for the interests of the players. The NCAA, those students really didn't have anyone. All they had was themselves and ostensibly the NCAA itself. The union issue may now start to change that, which is very interesting. But, up until just recently, that was not on the table. And so I always viewed the NCAA situation as being much worse and, calling out for a remedy, even more so than the NFL situation.
Once again, we're joined on Suit Up with the best dressed man in radio, yours truly, Xavier Pope, Pain Sports Network, Chicagoland Sports Radio. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. We're joined by Steve Finaro, senior writer for ESPN.com, ESPN the magazine, and co-author of League of Denial, the NFL Concussions, and the Battle for Truth, as well as Joe Siprit, who is the lead counsel for the current NCAA concussion case that no one's talking about except on this show more than any other place. Steve, we talked about the connection between the NCAA and the NFL concussion litigation. Do you think that maybe there may be some assistance given on the NFL side, maybe some of the players, maybe some of the unions, maybe jumping over to see whether there may be some help there with this going case? And are they interested in this at all on the NFL level, or is this something that's going to be pretty much standalone from the NCAA side?
Well, I think you're already seeing it, actually, Xavier. I think you're seeing that some of the lawyers who have been intimately involved in the NFL concussion litigation are also involved in the NCAA litigation in different ways. And how that plays out, I think, is going to be really interesting, because the reality is that we don't really know what's going to happen with the NFL case. Mm-hmm. The proposed settlement's already been rejected once. The sort of consensus that was formed around that settlement has completely fallen apart. And so the executive committee that oversaw the negotiations, which was composed of 6 leading lawyers, is completely fractured to the point where you have 2 lawyers who are now fighting against the settlement. So I think we really don't know. And if the NFL suit falls away, then that's going to create a whole new round of litigation, presumably. And then you're going to have a whole spate of other cases that have also been filed since the settlement was announced. So I think there's a lot of expertise that goes both ways in these things. So I think the answer is yes, but part of it I think is going to depend on sort of where the NFL case goes and sort of how it ends up getting resolved, and if it ends up getting resolved.
Joe, giant red flag in the NFL concussion settlement. Obviously, we talked about this with Steve in regards to the opt-out of the NCAA litigation. With that red flag, does that spell any sign that maybe antitrust litigation involving the NFL and the NCAA together as it relates to concussions?
No, I think that the issues from a legal perspective have to be addressed and managed separately, because, the duties that flow from the league to the players or from the NCAA to the student athletes,
right?
Now the analysis is different. The mandate of the NCAA, dating back to the days of Roosevelt, in the early part of the 20th century. I mean, it's all about player safety. And so fundamentally our case is about, acting within the scope of that mandate to manage what we think is the biggest, safety issue out there. For the NFL, rightly or wrongly, I think the analysis is just probably a little bit different. I got to tell you that from a practical perspective, as lead counsel for the plaintiffs in the NCAA case, I'm a little bit mystified as to why they tried to include that provision in the NFL settlement. I don't really see it as making a lot of sense, and it's obviously very unusual and got a lot of negative attention. So it was kind of a mysterious thing, and I'd be surprised if we saw that in the next iteration of the settlement.
Last question for you, Joe. You talked a little bit about the implementation of a return-to-play guidelines if this suit is successful. Tell us a little bit more about return-to-play guidelines so fans can understand it and what to maybe expect if you are successful in your suit against the National College Athletic Association.
Yeah, return-to-play guidelines get to the heart of this issue and what it is we're trying to accomplish with this lawsuit. People, I think one of the biggest misconceptions about our case, or maybe even the NFL cases, if I can speak to that too, is that people say, well, didn't you know that there was, a risk of concussions in football? Didn't you know that there was, a risk of injury and that it's a violent sport? And the response is, well, of course we knew that, but that's not the point. The point is, given that we know that concussions are inherent to football and to most other contact sports, the question then becomes, what can we do to be proactive and manage that issue? And the reason why that's so important is because if you have one concussion and you return to play before the symptoms of the first concussion have healed, that makes you exponentially more likely to get a second concussion. And when you get the second concussion, that in turn makes it exponentially more likely that you'll have serious or long-term brain damage. So the issue is not so much preventing the first concussion or preventing injuries, because that's an impossible thing to ever achieve if you're going to have the sport exist at any level as we know it. The issue is, when the concussion happens, can we immediately be proactive and step in to make sure the player does not return to the game or to practice before his symptoms have healed?
Interesting. Great conversation. I'm sure in the future, as you move forward through the case, Joe, that we'll see more come out, and we're excited to see what the implications are. And we definitely look forward to bringing you back on the show, definitely you as well, Steve, to discuss as the developments continue. Good luck in your case, Joe, and we hope that one day that we'll have all of this resolved, that we don't have to look back into days where guys weren't protected. Thank you for joining the best dressed man in radio. Yours truly, Xavier Pope on Suit Up. Join us again sometime.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, I'm telling you, deli sliced meat, Sean.
That's what we do.
I'm just deli sliced meat.
That's what we do.
Anyway, we are really going hard. So
we can go harder.
We can go harder?
And we will.
We will go harder. We come up in a 9 o'clock hour talking Final Four with my man Myriad Metcalf. We're also talking about Deshaun Jackson being cut from the Eagles. And I have a lot of words to say about that, and I just been kind of holding it in. Joel Corey will join us to talk about that. And we're going to read the statement by Jeffrey Kessler. He is the lead counsel for the antitrust litigation against the NCAA. Thank you for sending a statement out to our show, and we're going to read it on air exclusively on Suit Up. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. Brush your shoulders off, check your timepiece, and suit up!
As long as I got my suit and tie. I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman.
You are looking at the best closer the city has ever seen.
Closer, huh? Baseball?
Attorney, I close situations.
Chicago's very own. I've seen him on Skull Candy. I've seen him on pizza boxes. I've seen him on Adidas. We all know that Derrick Rose is a marketable figure. But it doesn't mean anything if he cannot step on the court. So now what do you have?
Suit Up every Tuesday, 8 to 10 p.m. Pace Sports Network, Chicagoland Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Suit Up with the best dressed man in radio. Yours truly, Xavier Pope, where sports is a business. Let's talk about it. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. Should college athletes be paid? Who's your pick to win the Final Four? We're digging right into it.
10 seconds for the Final Four. Harrison, that shot's the... Oh, he made it! Oh, LeVert was right in his face.
This is a great feeling, and we've been through so much, and we've been doubted so much that we just came together at the end of the season and just got better. And I don't know how many teams are mentally strong enough to do something like that.
I've seen Florida live twice this year against Kentucky and Kansas, and just the way they finish games with all those veterans and all the different scoring options they have. I think they're the best team in the country. And if you had to give me one team that I had to pick right now, it would definitely be the Gators. I think they will end the year on top of the podium as the national champion.
Wow. Well, Florida is in the Final Four, so Myron got that right. But one thing Myron did not get right was the fact that Kentucky would not go far in this tournament. Joining me is ESPN's college reporter Myriad Metcalf. I was talking before we got you cut off about, we discussed last time you were on Suit Up about teams that we're watching, Iowa versus Kentucky. And it was interesting, you wrote about them. They found themselves on a complete opposite end of force, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think the biggest difference, I think, between those two teams is just, the potential is always high for Kentucky, but similar, I think, teams that you were kind of waiting for them to put it all together. And like you said, Iowa obviously didn't do that, and I think there were a lot of signs that late in the year that they just weren't going to figure it out. But I think there were a lot of signs that Kentucky was in the same position, that, they were just going to be one of those teams that had a lot of potential but didn't show up or didn't fulfill it. But I'm shocked by what they've been able to do over these last couple of weeks.
What is the most shocking aspect of this Kentucky season? I believe that these young kids played with a passion over the course of the last few weeks. They didn't play with during the season. They were a little bit more helter-skelter, more confused in a lot of situations that cost them critical times. The focus seemed to be off and not necessarily working as a cohesive team and that was pretty obvious to anyone watching a Kentucky game. But saw this team gel together and become a team that people could actually like for a change for Kentucky.
Well, I think what happened is at some point, probably going into the postseason, they just, they realized that they were never going to meet the expectations that were placed upon them earlier in the year. And I think they were a team that, as much as they talked about the scrutiny and the media and all that stuff, I think they bought into it like everyone else. I think in the locker room, they thought that they were supposed to be the greatest thing that we've seen in years in college basketball. And when it wasn't working, the pressure continued to mount, and they lost to South Carolina and Arkansas. Just began to do things that we never expect to see from a Kentucky team with this much talent. But I think they really hit the reset button. And you hear players talk about that on the SEC tournament. They just decided, hey, this is another season for us. We still have our goals. And I think what you see with Kentucky right now is just a very loose Kentucky team, a team that's just playing. They're not worried about the height. They're not worried about the expectations. I think the best thing for this Kentucky team was coming into the tournament as an 8 seed.
Right.
If they come in as a 1 or 2 seed, I think we're seeing a different situation, not just because of the matchups they would have faced, but because of the idea that they weren't going to come under the radar. They weren't going to sort of fool people, if you will. They come in as an 8, and they have this new mentality, and they're just loose, and they're playing. And now we're seeing, the Kentucky team that we thought we'd see. And Calipari signed 6 McDonald's All-Americans last year.
Right. Wisconsin's Frank Kaminsky, big guy. Man, I'm a force in the middle. I think that he will be a huge factor in this Final Four. But what say you about maybe his impact over them going potentially vying for be that Big Ten team representing the trophy at the end of the day?
He's a problem for Kentucky because they haven't seen a guy like that. I mean, you look at Arizona, and for months, Arizona has been number one in adjusted defensive efficiency per Ken Pomeroy, who's sort of the guru of those numbers. So Arizona's been the top defensive team in America for a long time, even after they lost Brandon Ashley. They couldn't contain. Frank Kaminsky is a big 6'10", 6'11" kid who can hit the threes, and Bo Ryan's offense, he's always moving. He's not a real back-to-the-basket player.
Right.
He's a guy who's always moving. And I think the challenge is, it's similar to the challenge that if you go back to Michigan and Tennessee, Tennessee was trying to figure out who to put on Glenn Robinson III and Nick Stauskas. They tried to go with big men. The big men weren't quick enough. They tried to go with guards. The guards just weren't big enough or talented enough to stick with those guys. I think it's a similar situation when you play Frank Kaminsky. You can put Julius Randle on him, but you don't want Julius Randle playing that far from the basket, I don't think. You can try to put an Aaron Harrison on him even, or an Alex Poitras on him, but then they're giving up 6-7 inches potentially to this guy. So I think it's a really difficult matchup in terms of just how Kentucky will find a way to neutralize him. But at the same time, it's a two-way street. Wisconsin has to find a way to deal with Kentucky, and that obviously won't be an easy task.
Once again, we're talking to Myriad Metcalf, ESPN college basketball reporter. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. Best dressed man in radio, Suit Up, where sports is a business. Let's talk about it. DeAndre Daniels from UConn, being able to really put up some big numbers in the tournament. How big of an impact will he be as far as the Final Four is concerned?
Well, I mean, I think if this DeAndre shows up, if the one that we've seen the last couple of weeks shows up, I think it's a huge impact, especially against a team like Florida that is really tough inside. I mean, they've got big guys like Patrick Young who are sort of the pure 5, but they've got guys like Casey Prather who are 6'5", but they act like they're 6'10". That's why Florida's so good. I mean, they got really, small forward guys who can play on both ends of the floor much bigger than they are. So I think DeAndre Daniels has to be effective in that game. But, again, I hope this is the real DeAndre Daniels. I think it is. I think, obviously, someone got in his head and said, look, if you want to get money, you want to get paid, you better prove it now. And I think really he's kind of woken up to that. But there were some moments throughout the season where you were just going, where on earth is DeAndre Daniels? You know, where is he when they need him? And that wasn't that long ago. So I think this is a guy who's playing really well. I'm not completely sold that this is the real DeAndre Daniels yet. You know, sometimes when the spotlight gets bigger, guys tend to shrink away. And I think another challenge is Shabazz Napier has been LeBron James. You know, Shabazz Napier is doing so well, so it's easy to feed off of that. What happens if Shabazz struggles on Saturday night? What happens if he's not the catalyst, if he can't get things going? Can a guy like DeAndre Daniels kind of fill that void and step up? I'm not sure, but if he plays the way he's been playing over the last couple of weeks, that's certainly a plus for UConn.
Myron, you say that, and it reminds me, it's almost eerie. It reminds me of some of the things that most of the sports writers were saying the last time Connecticut went to the Final Four with Kemba Walker. And they were saying, what if Kemba doesn't show up in this game? He doesn't show up in that game. Jeremy Lamb is going to have to carry the day, and he's going to have to continue to be the same guy that he's been throughout the tournament. So with that being said, what other guys outside of Shabazz Napier and Daniels could play key figure roles coming up in the Final Four for Connecticut?
Well, I mean, obviously a lot starts with those two, but Ryan Boatwright, you know, if you look back a couple of years ago, I mean, Ryan Boatwright came in as this really hot prospect. You know, I mean, he was the man coming into the program. He's been so-so, I would say, throughout the season. He's been at some really good moments, some really tough moments. But, you know, Ryan Boatwright's going to be a guy who I think, you know, really has to step up for this team. I think he's going to be – I think to win the national championship, you need three guys to shine on both nights. It's not one guy. It can't be two guys. You need three guys, I think, to really step up and have a big night. So I think Boatwright has to be that third guy. If you're looking for sort of that off-the-radar guy who could – kind of turn things around. You have to wonder about Niles Giffey, I think it's Giffey, the German kid that they have that Kevin Ollie has been using for a lot of minutes. Hasn't been great, but he's had a few, you know, double-digit efforts. Is that the guy who can kind of come in and give you something? He's a 49% three-point shooter. So when you got a 6'7" kid who can hit the three ball like that, you just have to find him. So if they can get in a situation where Daniels is rolling, Shabazz is rolling, Ryan Boatwright is rolling, now you take some of the pressure off a guy like that, and he can just find his spot, find his sweet spot, and hit big shots. So I think that's another name to look out for as well.
Everybody talks about the elite coaches, and you all first name off your mouth or your tongue is Tom Izzo or either Coach K. And I just find it amazing that Billy Donovan does not get the same type of credit or the same type of mention as those two guys. It seems like he always knows how to build players. I don't think he turns down one-and-done guys. I just don't think they really want to go to the program because of the way he runs the program. You know, Jabari was in the last three. Florida was in the last three, and he chose, obviously, Duke. And with all of that being said, you know, what is it about him, his program, and the way that he does things that not only leads to national championships and at least getting into the Elite Eight consistently for teams and players, and then his players not being highly thought of, but once they get to the next level, they become solid professional basketball players?
Well, I mean, I agree with you in terms of just Billy Donovan being overlooked, man. I mean, he's kind of like the Eminem of college basketball coaching. You know, everybody knows he's the best, but they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
I think he's just in that class. You know, he's a special coach, and what he does is he really develops guys. I mean, if you look at a Scotty Wilbekin, who came to the University of Florida when he was just 17 years old. This guy was a freshman. He was 17. You look at him now, look how much he has grown. Yeah. You look at Patrick Young and the way he's developed. Casey Prather, nobody knew his name 2 years ago. People didn't really know him last year. He was a National Player of the Year candidate. So I think what Billy Donovan does is he takes this raw talent, and I think in order to do that, you have to have a really good eye for where a player can be 2 to 3 years from now. You know, sometimes you take a kid who looks raw, but you have to be able to say, okay, if he comes through my system, if he commits to it, how good can he be 2 to 3 years from now? And that's what Billy Donovan does well. He keeps these guys around, and they just continue to improve. And you get to a situation like this where you have a team that is led by seniors. And that obviously is a unique situation. The combination of experience and talent, no one in the Final Four has that, like the way that Florida has that. So I think Donovan has just had a really good track record of helping players really fulfill their potential in terms of what they do at the next level. I think a couple of things help. Again, this whole development process. You go back to the 06, 07 teams, Joakim Noah, Horford, Corey, Brewer, those guys, could have left after 06. They stayed another year, got even better, won another national title, which I think helped them in their pro careers. And I think another thing is just you have guys who have played a lot of basketball. When you're going to the Elite Eight 3 years in a row, you have been around a long time. You're not playing, 28, 29, 30 games. You're playing 35, 36 games every year. And I think that adds up in terms of the stage you're on and just in terms of the experience factor. So I think all those things help, in terms of Billy Donovan really producing these great teams. But in terms of the one-and-done thing, he's going after those kids. Every coach in America would sign Kentucky's kid. Any coach who tells you that they don't want one-and-done is lying. Every coach in America would take Kentucky's kid. Kentucky's just found a way to get those kids, and everybody wants to knock the one-and-done crew. But the bottom line is it's all about talent. If that's a one-and-done, if that's a senior, it doesn't matter. You just want talent. Billy Donovan has found a way to sort of get that talent without depending on the one-and-done crew.
Last question for you, Myron. I put together a bracket based on graduation rates. I always talk about the business law of sports. I'm always going to bring that angle in. Our champion would be Kansas. The team that would have reached the farthest in this tournament would have been Kentucky. They would have made it to the Sweet 16 because they have a high graduation rate. Surprising to hear, actually. They would go the furthest. But it's a tragedy to see a team like UConn, who was ineligible last year, 8% graduation rate in the Final Four. Do fans really care about that? Or does this now make a little bit more sense in the light of the latest rulings for Northwestern players?
I don't think fans care one bit, especially at this stage. I don't think, Shabazz Napier is going to be out there and people are going to be wondering what his GPA is. And for me, I don't believe in the student-athlete thing. I think it's baloney. I think these guys are athletes who happen to be students. Sometimes students occasionally, depending on, the program, depending on the commitment of that student. Nothing against the one-and-dones, but you can literally go to school for 5 months and then leave and go train for the pros and, leave college. So I don't think that's a real quote-unquote education. So I really don't think fans are too concerned. People get concerned when the APR becomes a problem and there are penalties. But in general, I don't think people are wondering whether or not these kids are graduating or not. And I think obviously there's part of that that's unfortunate because they should get an education. But to me, it's so complicated. The pay-for-play, graduation rates, are they pros or amateurs? Very, very complicated situation. But me personally, if we would just start with the idea that these guys are athletes first, because that's what they are, regardless of what the NCAA says, then I think it would be easier to digest some of the other things that happen that make them really different from typical students.
Great response. Myron Metcalf, always a pleasure to have you on. Once again, join the best dressed man in radio again sometime. We look forward to having you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again. Myron Metcalf always giving us a great scoop on college basketball and really great opinion. Start with the fact these guys are athletes. Anyway, and I could go on and on about that. Once again, thanks again for joining the show. After the break, we're talking to Joel Corey about Deshaun Jackson being cut by the Eagles, keeping Riley Cooper, the whole gang-banging situation. We're going to dig into that a little bit after the break. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. Still reading the statement by Jeffrey Kessler on the antitrust litigation suit. Suit up!
Welcome back to Suit Up. Payton Sports Network, ChicagolandSportsRadio.com.
Welcome back to Suit Up with the best dressed man in radio, yours truly, Xavier Pope. Sports is a business. Let's talk about it. Give us a call, 312-564-7375. Had our lines mixed up, dropped a couple of calls from some of our
Rob, please call
callers.
back in with your comment.
Yeah,
Rob from Chicago.
We want to be able to have folks to give us a call and let us know how they feel. I believe that this is the absolute best show that we've had so far. We've been able to do deli meat slicing of it all, like I like to say. As we all know, Philadelphia wide receiver, former Philadelphia wide receiver DeSean Jackson, outspoken, a dangerous man on return field who will really look great in the Bears back and the special teams now that Devin Hester is gone.
Have to give you the Singletary for that one. Can't do it.
I know, but I just had
won't do it.
I had to just think about it.
Can't
I
win
had to
with
think
him.
about the prospects of DeSean Jackson. Being,
I actually think you can win with him, though.
I think so too.
I think so.
I think so too. But he was released, and it was a contract that was set to pay him $10.5 million in 2014, and now there's some talks about too high contract demands and just a lot of drama going on. Here to talk to me about it is a man who we hope to be a new friend of the program, Joel Corey. He's a former sports agent, NFL contracts and salary cap expert and writer. He talks about NFL contracts and salary cap articles on Football Post and CBS Sports. Welcome to Suit Up with the Best Dressed Man in Radio. Joel, how are you to this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
You're very much welcome. DeSean Jackson, cut by the Eagles, loses out on 10.5 large. Obviously, he was upset. There seems to be two different angles here. There's this, he hangs out with the gangbanging angle, and then there's this money angle. I believe that the Eagles made a really, really convenient way not to spend money on a receiver because we know that there's an ebb and flow as far as receivers' value in the National Football League. You see Megatron get a giant contract, but you may see other receivers get the shaft. And so how does the money versus the whole illegal activity play a role in anything as far as DeSean Jackson's cutting?
Oh, yeah, money definitely plays a factor into it because it's actually unusual for a receiver to have a career year like he did, over 1,300 yards and 80 catches, to get released. I think the big factor is Chip Kelly just doesn't want him around for some reason. Now, some of those reasons are football-related because he's got that kind of diva mentality that some receivers have had where his work ethic could be questioned. He can be somewhat unprofessional and immature. But at the same time, if Chip Kelly thinks that the system makes players versus players make the system, he could be in for a rude awakening.
Interesting also, we see a guy who really got under fire for racist comments, Riley Cooper, before he gets to the market, gets 5 years, $25 million. Jeremy Maclin coming back from ACL, gets a 1-year deal, $6 million, 3.5 guaranteed. So this is money they could have maybe dished out elsewhere. Why was the priority on making sure that Maclin and Cooper were signed and making sure DeSean Jackson remained with the Eagles?
Well, if you can get those two re-signed, it gives you more latitude to do something with DeSean. Now, I want to touch on the whole Riley Cooper thing a little bit because I find that interesting, that he's considered, in Chip Kelly's mind, a better locker room fit despite his comment at that concert than DeSean Jackson in a predominantly African-American locker room. There's a little bit of a disconnect there to me.
Yeah, that reminds me another disconnected coach, amazing. Joe Philbin.
Joe Philbin as well, but just Michael Vick and DeSean both being gone. And it's fair to say that what that organization asked Michael Vick to do after that situation with Riley Cooper and the way he saved that locker room and publicly went out and spoke to the media to kind of get everything to simmer down, his first season as a head coach was saved by Michael Vick in a lot of ways, in my opinion.
Interesting. So
I definitely agree because that thing could have spiraled out of control if you didn't have some player to kind of put a lid on everything, just because, particularly if you've got some Southern players who view that word a little differently than maybe some West Coast players, then they're not going to be so forgiving of that word. So Michael Vick is much maligned because of his heinous acts with dogs, but at the same time, he was a catalyst for keeping team unity.
Interesting. Once again, we're talking to Joel Corey, former sports agent, NFL contract and salary cap expert and writer, talking NFL contract and salary cap articles on Football Post and CBS Sports. Give us a call, Payton Sports Network, Chicagoland Sports Radio, 312-564-7375. Very interesting, the whole Riley Cooper situation, and how the press pretty much vilified instantly Deshaun Jackson. A lot of outlets talked about this whole gangbanging situation, comparing him to Aaron Hernandez. And really, Deshaun Jackson, other than being a very brash player, he didn't go out and call anyone a derogatory term. He didn't commit a crime. And this guy is not the great locker room guy. How does maybe perception or maybe forgiveness of activities of maybe players that are not African American, maybe not the same playing field as far as actions are perceived?
Yeah, I think race does play a little bit of part of it, and we can look at a couple of examples. Even last night, look at how Ryan Braun was received in Milwaukee, standing ovation. And here's a guy that basically ruined the reputation of the drug tester by saying that he was incompetent, he made a mistake, when it turns out that he was the one who was taking the performance-enhancing drugs versus how Barry Bonds was treated. Granted, Barry Bonds isn't the most likable person, but he was considered generally a baseball pariah and somewhat in the Bay Area as well. But Ryan Braun gets the standing ovation last night, which was a little shocking.
Wow. Yeah, I think the double standard there's exists in the media, and it also exists with fans. Do you think it may be because the majority of the buying public is not African American? Maybe empathize empathy maybe with players that look like them.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, because there's a certain, they're able to relate to white players a little more than the African American player, because you see it in how there was Jimmer mania a couple of years ago at the NCAA, that you saw that when Jimmer Fredette was arguably the best college basketball player that year, that all of a sudden he becomes an overnight sensation. That's not because of the African American community. That's because the white community embraced him. And you saw, and here's one I would have loved to have seen. Richard Sherman, who's a highly intelligent African American man, after the play he made in the NFC Championship, he's interviewed. He's kind of immediately viewed as the angry, ignorant black man. And I would love to have seen how the initial reaction would have been if it had been a white player who'd made that play and had the same type of interview. We'll never know. I have a feeling that Richard Sherman, being very excited and still in football mode after that play, contributed to some of mainstream America's initial impressions of that moment.
Now, Joel, as an attorney, I like to look at things from both sides. So, conversely, people may say, okay, lighten up, African Americans. You guys are looking a little bit into this too much, playing the race card. Deshaun Jackson, he's a very colorful player, not a great locker room guy. Maybe we don't know what's going on in the locker room. Maybe Riley Cooper did make a bad mistake, and he's been a great locker room guy. Is that believable?
Well, it's somewhat plausible, but at the same time, in a predominantly African-American locker room, Riley Cooper, after his misstep, was going to have to mind his P's and Q's. I have my issues with Deshaun Jackson, not for anything for the company he may or may not keep. I just don't particularly like him as a player based on how he performed in his contract year when he put Jadeveon Clowney's lack of effort this year to shame by protecting himself way too much on a football field in a contract year. That just kind of turned me off to him. But that's just my view of him. But I do think that the whole gang tie thing is overblown, because if you have any African-American athlete who comes from the inner city or any place which is populated with gangs, they're going to have some friends or some acquaintances who at one time or another were in a gang. That's unavoidable. And I think that's something that seems to be lost in the whole thing. And we also seem to forget that this is a guy that, as much maligned as he is, has been very outspoken against bullying. So there are some positive things he does publicly that are getting lost in the shuffle.
Joel, last question. I'm intrigued about the fact that it was based on some associations. No laws broken. The CBA, the collective bargaining agreement between the National Football League and the National Football League's Players Association, does this ring a interesting bell to the NFLPA and say, hey, the circumstances under which he's been released doesn't seem to maybe line up with, hey, he didn't get caught for a crime, nothing like that happened, but maybe suspicion of bad acts? Or is that much to do about nothing? Is that something that doesn't really have any legs to stand on?
I think right now it doesn't have any legs to stand on. I think Aaron Hernandez created a heightened awareness for potential bad characters, but at the same time, you have to see more of a pattern for the NFLPA to probably be able to do anything about it. I think Philadelphia should have just been honest about it instead of, I think, putting this article out as a smoke screen or a diversion, because I think they leaked it, and just say, look, he's someone who doesn't fit into what we're trying to do. He's talented, but we think he's more trouble than he's worth. He's going to be in bad influence on the team, notwithstanding his talent. And that would have been a justifiable reason to get rid of him, because that's happened before. They had a receiver about a decade ago, Terrell Owens, that they thought was more trouble than he was worth. That was more talented than Deshaun Jackson. They let him go. So I don't see any reason why they couldn't have just been frank about that and said, here's why we're releasing him.
Last question. I thought that was the last question, but I thought about the next steps for Deshaun. We heard about 24 hours ago, Pro Football Talk was talking about the Redskins being a done deal. We've heard it, Raiders. We've heard the Browns. Who's going to pay Deshaun Jackson?
That's going to be the interesting thing, because we're going to see how much all his character issues are going to come into play, because he's earned his money based on his play last year. The Redskins have an issue in paying him because Pierre Garçon is already the number one receiver making $8.5 million a year. Do you want to invest that much money in the receiver position if he is trying to recoup the money he lost? And if he's that much of a character concern, why would Cleveland even have an interest in him when he would potentially be a bad influence on Josh Gordon? So I find the whole Browns interest be a little suspicious.
Anything the Browns do is absolutely suspicious.
The Raiders are throwing money your way. Why not?
Once again, thank you, Joel Corey, for joining the best dressed man in radio. Yours truly, Xavier Pope, to talk about these issues and more in the National Football League. Look forward to having you on again sometime.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
You're very much welcome. Just a great show. Thin sliced meats, baby.
It's something, number one, when you have a number one receiver, and basically now Jeremy Maclin, who's a number two, healthy. You have two number twos. Riley Cooper wasn't even a number two to me.
It's a number three, number four.
He's a number three, number four. If I have to give Eric Decker a number two, then definitely Riley Cooper's a number three. Absolutely. But this goes back to the ego. Are we seeing Steve Spurrier all over again, believing too much in his system and saying, I don't need this guy,
right? Because
my system will work. Because at Oregon, he never named one elite wide receiver that's ever come out of Oregon.
Why? You don't look at me.
All he loves are the small scat backs.
Scat back, yep.
He has plenty of scat backs.
Darren Sproles is now
there. So now he's got his offense. He's got his weapons the way he wants them. This is not the Pac-12, my friend. This is the NFC East. and your defense still stinks.
And let me say this, Chip Kelly. Fads come and go of the National Football League. You know why? Because there are coaches that scheme. Learn what you're doing. Learn the weaknesses and attack it. I don't think the Eagles will be as successful next year trying to implement that whole scheme against teams that are going to be better prepared for them.
But from a strategic standpoint, I don't think he understands that when you have a guy that keeps the safeties out of the box,
right?
Shady does work.
Yeah.
Now Shady can go to work in the running game, in the screen game, in the passing game.
Right.
But now the safeties can creep up. Now, okay, man-to-man on Macklin and Riley Cooper.
We don't know if Macklin is going to be anywhere near as fast as he was last year.
And what, they're going to waste a first-round pick? When that defense is that bad, they're going to waste a first-round pick on a wide receiver? Right. Come on, man. That's Jerry Angelo-ish.
Wow. Just really interesting. I don't trust the reasons why the Eagles released Deshaun Jackson. It stinks, and Joel talked about that. We all know. Just be real.
Somebody else said it for us. I'm glad we didn't have to say it tonight.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you. We didn't have to say a word.
We didn't have to say a word.
We didn't have to say a word.
It's time for one of your favorite segments,
and that will be
Wild Style.
Bring it.
What time is it? The Wild Style.
Now, today on Wild Style, let's go a little business with one of the best hip-hop businessmen that I know of. 50 Cent was actually the first interview on The Breakfast Club on his first show on Revolt. Talking business with 50 Cent. I mean, the guy has 2 diamond albums. But the things he talked about, the success of one Kendrick Lamar and how it relates to how things are done in the music biz. I want to get your take on this, X, from a business perspective.
Sure. Kendrick Lamar's success is his success. Like the work that they did, the groundwork, is what sold his record. Because the records didn't even work at radio until after the record sold.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he surprised them with how big his numbers was.
Right.
And then they said, let's support it, and get the records up later. So now, when you see that, you go, you got to work. Look.
Now, the background to this is that he showed much love to Kendrick Lamar because he said Kendrick Lamar works. These young guys don't want to work. He said that's why Kendrick gets all the credit and gets the success. Because now the way the business is, X, you're not getting the money up front anymore. They're not pushing you and putting marketing behind you up front. You have to prove that the public likes you, and then they'll get behind the music.
The industry is in Missouri. Show me state.
Show me state now.
And you have to work hard. You need to build your own brand. I always talk about this a lot, how Rocky Fresh, Chicago MC, packing out houses all over the country, all over the world.
Yeah.
Because he was able to build a groundswell of his own until he was able to track Diddy and attract Rick Ross to him. And kudos to a young man. He was 20 some plus, little over that years old, doing it on his own. Soulja Boy did it. You may like him or may not like him, but he was able to promote himself and get a lot of views and get a record contract out of it. And that's just how the industry is right now, because it's been squeezed as far as dollars and budgets and the emergence of the 360 deal. And the industry was real wise to jump on that because they weren't getting concert proceeds and some of the other merch proceeds that artists were basically taking for themselves.
Yeah.
And now they've been able to take it. So 50 is correct. But if you're going to give credit to Kendrick Lamar, 50, I know you guys are going to hate me for this, but give credit to Macklemore. Did the same exact thing. But as far as building and generating his own energy.
To be honest, I don't think anybody's ever taken credit away from Macklemore and what he's built. I just think people generally don't respect him or look at him as a hip hop.
Why
artist.
not though? Is it because he's
That's,
white?
You know,
I mean, his lyrics are dope.
I don't think that's it. I don't.
You don't think it's that at all?
think,
You don't think it's a double standard as relates to having skills as a white rapper versus a black? So we were talking about the whole Deshaun Jackson race element. You think it's the same in hip hop?
We understand generational gaps. It's the same thing in hip hop. There are older hip hop heads, and people just believe this is hip hop. Progression can only go so far,
and it has to have a black face. Keep it real, Sean.
No, because Eminem gets that respect.
Eminem gets respect.
Jen got that respect. I think it's more of a persona. I'll say that.
But but Macklemore's persona is a modern millennial persona.
Yeah.
Dressing in the clothes, talking about gay rights. Yeah. That's what kids that are in their teens and 20s, that's the big thing for them.
Yeah, 50 just talked about this as well in the midst of the interview. He said, let's not play this game like hip hop is not masculine. He said, let's stop playing this game. It is.
It is.
And anybody that steps into this arena that does not come across like that is going to have a problem. He was like, in any
other Grammys is not a problem.
No, but have a problem as far as credibility.
Right. Well, the Recording Academy says yes.
Yes.
So
we talked about this. Hip hop is the only genre that could care less
about the Grammys. I guarantee
you can build a solid career.
I guarantee. Well, other than Jay-Z saying that the Grammy was a sippy cup for Blue.
But once again, you just spoke about a statement that will continue to grow that sentiment against Macklemore's or the future Macklemore's that we're talking about. When a Jay-Z comes out,
say this is worthless to
and
me.
say this is worthless, that sits in the hip hop community, and future generations will continue to look at it in that way. You will start to see no hip hop representation as far as people showing up, artists showing up. I guarantee it. You will start seeing artists nominated and not even coming.
I don't think that's gonna happen
because they don't even believe. Okay, X,
I don't see that.
You heard it here first.
I don't see that happening. You heard it here first. The reason why I say that is because there's so many other business avenues that are tied to your success.
Kanye there this year?
But Kanye has reached a level of importance in the industry where he's known for shucking the industry.
And what I'm telling you is,
so he's a different guy.
Guys
Sean,
that make it say stuff like that, they give courage to the other guys to say, you know what, I might try that.
I guarantee it won't happen.
Okay.
I would like to see someone who just stepped on the scene. Hey, you're nominated for New Artist of the Year.
Heck,
new Artist of the Year.
We didn't think Kentucky would be in the Final Four, and we definitely didn't think Deshaun Jackson would get cut before Riley Cooper.
Very true.
That's all I'm saying.
They're very, very true, but I do think they're absent Eminem. Eminem is a separate, kind of a different deal. But absent him, I think that Beastie Boys as well, that people don't necessarily. It takes a lot to win over fans as a white rapper.
So if you put Macklemore's music next to M's and next to the Beastie Boys, are you telling me there's no musical difference under the guidelines of hip hop and what most people consider hip hop? Come on, X.
I think that Macklemore's music, Eminem's music, and the Beastie Boys music are three completely different sounding sets of hip hop.
I agree.
So you really, I mean, you can get. The only reason you were really comparing them is that they are white rappers.
If the core of hip hop was the 0-0 point on the XY axis, Macklemore would be the furthest point away from that point.
That doesn't make him any less hip hop.
No, but I'm just letting you know that's how people view him.
That's how people view him. But not Talib Kweli, who was happy to go on tour with this guy.
Yeah, it's money.
So that. See,
Sean, this is not stupid.
See, Sean, this is why this is important for you to continue to sit next to me. Is because we start talking about this stuff, we'll go all over the social, we'll go up and down around, and it'll always come back to money.
You follow the money.
This is a business, whether it's the sports business, whether it's the entertainment business. Guess what? At the end of that was called?
It's the money.
It's called a business.
Yes.
So I just want you guys to know that. And I have someone I would like to put in contempt of court, Sean. So we want to get into that.
We're gonna get to contempt.
Get to contempt? Okay. Just make sure.
But I gotta let you know.
10 minutes left. I need to make sure I put someone in contempt of court.
Fifth also said some stuff about the hip hop consumer. It's more business.
I'm interested in that.
You know what allowed us to make a lot of money on the street? When we were selling dope, we put out samples.
Yeah.
The samples were the small bag things. I'm not giving the audience enough time to get high off of something else. Hip hop consumers are fiends. They will cop from anyone who has something good. He don't have to be a regular. He can be a Trinidad James, come in, go all in my grill. Now, and it's a joke, because you laugh at the character. This is a guy that you directly compare to nothing but the joke that Martin made.
Jerome.
You see what I'm saying? So it's a joke. You look at it and it's like, it's strange enough, and he's saying he's high. I'm sweating. So you going, and it's real. This is the real person. Like, he couldn't have fixed his hair like that. It's not extensions. It's not a wig. It's really him. So that's what makes it actually work. Like,
Fifth, I love Fifth, man. He's a very smart businessman, and he just kept it real. First, he talked about the power of confidence as an artist. Trinidad James, Soulja Boy, people who are not necessarily considered talented rappers, and this other guy, I keep forgetting his name. This other really obscure rapper that's getting some YouTube hits right now. It's just really ridiculous raps.
Young Baby.
Give me another one. I can't remember his name. We'll think about it over a couple minutes. But he's right. If you say you're good, people will believe it. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rappers out here that say they're good, and they say it enough. Okay, I guess the guy is pretty good. And you need to have confidence in yourself and in your brand, no matter what you're doing. And it especially applies to hip hop, that you need to be confident. That goes back to Macklemore dialing back and saying, "Well, I didn't deserve to get it." That kind of ruined a little bit of his credibility as an MC as well. No MC gets on the mic and say, I'm not a dope rapper. Although Nas said, I don't kick the braggadocious raps.
Right.
But if you say you're on the mic and you're the best, you're the best. People respect that. But to shirk away from being good is something that the hip hop community does not respect. I can say that.
Now, this is something you will love.
Okay.
I put this clip here just for you.
Okay.
If you laughed at the last clip,
sure,
you would definitely laugh at this.
Okay.
Sha Money, who came in the game, was there. Former president of G Unit. Now, this is the picture. 50 gets on. First singles in the club. How does Sha Money get paid? Because he did the production. He goes to our guy, rest in peace, former manager for 50 Cent. And he says, man, 50,000. And, Fifth gives him options. And this is what ensues.
What we gonna do about Sha? I'm like, what? I'm like, oh, he trying to play me against my man. Because me and Chris was just getting together like that. I'm like, yo, I was closer to Sha than Chris. And he's like, no, he's asking about how to charge for studio time. And I'm like, well, what's the studio bill? His light bill? So when I paid the $50,000, check this out, he asked for $50,000. I said, yo, don't take $50,000, take $30,000 in a point. Mind you, the point was worth $1.3 million.
Damn.
I sold 13 million records on that album. So it's like, take 30,000, take 1.3, 30.
Right.
Instead of 50,000. And then when we come back to the lawyer's office, he says, yeah, I spoke to 50. He said the 50 was cool. I go, there was only two options. He said 50,000, give him the 50,000. I give you the 50,000 cash as singles right now, because he didn't understand what he was doing at that point. Then the lawyer goes, no, listen, can I say something to him? Can I just say something to him, because I don't think he understands exactly what he's actually doing. I go in the other room, he come back, he said, okay, I'll take the 30,000 in the point, because the lawyer was like, I'll give you 20,000 for the point right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to take this. And then he was like, all right, because he thought I was trying to give him less money.
Right.
When I said 30 versus 50, but
man, I love that one.
You can just envision that.
Yeah.
Like Fifth is sitting there, Jimmy Iovine, everybody's in the office, and he's laughing like, dude, on the sneak, I'm trying to hook you up. You're my guy.
Right.
Don't just take this flat rate of 50. You did the joint. You have rights to publishing, all this stuff. Take the point. The song is hot right now.
Right.
We're killing it. At that time, they didn't know it was going to do 13 mil, but they knew it was going to do something.
So of course his lawyer is
first
telling
of
him to take
all,
the money.
break down the point.
Let me
break down the point.
Let me tell you why the lawyer pulled him aside and put 50 in the next room.
You probably
more
told
likely
him
than
to
not,
shut up,
the
right?
lawyer probably had an arrangement where he probably gets 5% of all the artist's proceeds. So let's do the math on this. $50,000, the lawyer gets $2,500. $1.3 million. Now you're looking at a little bit more than around $75,000 for the lawyer in his pocket.
In his pocket.
So the lawyer's, I'm gonna make more than what you would be taking.
He really could care less about him.
I'm like, well, hold on.
We're not turning that down.
Wait. And 50, right? He's like, I would give you 20,000 because guess what? I still come out $50,000 more than what I would have made.
Man, I would have had this.
I thought 50 was going to come back and say he still took the money. He was so stupid. Because you know why? I've been in this game for you. I've been in this game since 2003.
So that's the common theme, you think?
Yeah, but here's the thing.
In the industry.
I've been in this game for a minute. And what I have seen, especially on the entertainment side, not as much on the sports side, is that artists think they know so much about this game. They read this book of music and think they know the whole game of the music industry, about every contract possible, and will come to you and tell you something that is not in their best interest because they heard Pookie and them tell them this and that about what they think they know about the industry, but they're talking to a professional who have spent $100,000 on his own education to make sure that you make your $100,000, your millions of dollars.
Now, I would never fight you when it comes to entertainment and whether or not entertainers can represent themselves.
Because, all right,
yeah,
athletes at least they're in school or something.
Yes.
Whereas entertainers, you may not have no education at all, so you may have zero knowledge about what to do. As we see from 50 Cent, he's clearly knowledgeable about business, and that's why he does well at what he does. And props to him for really hooking his boy up because he really didn't have to do.
He didn't have to do.
He could have kept the meal for himself.
Yeah.
He could have kept the meal for himself. That's why this industry is so shady.
He's like,
man.
I'm trying to feed you. You're gonna be in my pockets anyway.
Right.
I'm trying to feed you up front.
Right.
Stop being greedy and get educated.
Exactly.
And see, that's what. For people who don't know, I have to get this out. A lot of people we do this show, right? There's a lot of things that came to create this, make it happen, so I can get you to content. You pop off. When you pop off, if I come to you like, yo, you owe me, what you gonna pay me? Or do I say, man, my man popped off. My mother man popped off.
Right.
That's on my resume. Let's go to work. Now let's go to work. I got 2 made cats on my resume. Now it's time for me to go to work.
Right.
See, that's the mentality you have to have. That's what Fifth was talking about.
Yeah.
You have to work and build your brand so now people feel like they need you.
Yeah.
And they come to you.
Yeah.
And see, that's what these young cats aren't doing, especially young cats that are under other great artists.
Right.
You know, with Lloyd Banks and with what was the other guy from down in Georgia that was on G Unit?
Oh,
not Yayo, but it was Yayo, Banks,
and he just maybe darn, I'm forget his name.
But whatever his name.
Shorty wanna ride with
right,
me?
Exactly.
We can get it low.
Right. But it's like, dude, you didn't want to work. You just wanted to ride the wave of 50. And when that wave started to go down, then you wanted to come at 50 like he wasn't pushing our stuff. He wasn't promoting us. That's not his job.
Right.
It's not the label's job to make you hot.
Not anymore, it's not.
No.
Not anymore, it's not. And it's really not that. It's not that in the general industry in and of itself. What you do in this business is you create a brand.
That's my content.
You build it up, and you attract resources to you. Suit Up is not a giant show, but I believe that this is the best.
It's a dope brand.
Sports, business, legal show there. I mean, heck, we were really the first to do it like this. And there's no show out there like this show. I'm just being honest. I'm just not me being cocky. I just believe that we have fantastic content, fantastic guests. I know what I'm talking about. My guests know what I'm talking about. Plus, I'm the best dressed man in radio, and we just do it in a way that combines information, education with the swag, with, you know, just letting you know that these are cool guys giving you information. So that's what we do on Suit Up here. I want to jump out of here with putting somebody or some institution in contempt of court.
Would you tell this court why you should not be held in contempt of court?
Tried to handle the entire situation with honor, with integrity, with class, with dignity, and with professionalism, because that's who I am.
In the meantime, what do you say we get down to business?
If I had done this intentionally or unintentionally, I'd be the first one to step up and say, I did it.
What does it mean to you, sir? Not to some, but to you.
I truly believe in my heart, and I would bet my life that this substance never entered my body at any point.
But I'm still waiting to hear good cause. Now, do you have one or not?
Not.
You are now held in contempt.
Contempt of court. If this is the first time you've listened to Suit Up, contempt of court is where we throw people, institutions, leagues, pretty much under the bus for actions that they take over the course of the week. Either they come out the following week, or they are there permanently, like the Green Bay Packers or any rivals of any Chicago team. They stay there forever. My contempt of court this week. Last week, there was a ruling on the National Labor Relations Board that held for Northwestern. Before that happened, the case really wasn't paid attention to. People thought that it would be quickly disposed of in about a month's time. So not a lot of attention was really paid to it. People thought that the Capitol was pretty much some crackpots, right? Not led by a guy who had tons of education. Like Kane Coulter. And now after the ruling, we hear every analyst on TV, every network talking about the implications of it all. When we've been talking about it on this show for over 3 months. And I pretty much started out my first show talking about that I believe that the college athletes should be paid. You can go check our archives, whatever you want to do to prove me up. I've been the only member of the media saying that the National Labor Relations Board would fine for Northwestern and its players. And why? Because of just simple, basic concepts behind law that's been established for over 100+ years. But every other member of the media wanted to play with the establishment, wanted to write the same stories that you always hear, give the same analysis that you've always seen. And guess what? Everyone was quote-unquote shocked when the ruling happened. People that are not bold enough to make and create great content that informs the audience, most importantly the fans, about what's going on in our games. You are doing a disservice to sports fans. They deserve to know that the NCAA has denied concussions to its players. They deserve to know that the National Labor Relations Board has a burden not on the players to prove that they're employees, but for Northwestern to prove that that they're not employees. Because Northwestern bore that burden, it was difficult for them to say that these guys were not employees. But no one talked about that Northwestern bore the burden. No one. Nobody at all. People deserve to know that with the Ed O'Bannon cases, that now this is now being pretty much grandfathered in, this portion with the NLRB. So the implications of that case is now going on. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week. But all of you analysts, anchors, sports writers, so-called legal experts and lawyers, business reporters that are on major news media sites, every single one of you are held in contempt for towing the line, not educating fans, not letting them know what's going on with our sports, and that's why you guys are being held in contempt. I just had to say that. I was going to lead off the show with that, but I didn't. Lastly, I want to read really quickly this statement by Jeffrey Kessler in regards to the suit with the antitrust litigation versus the NCAA. We didn't mention it during the show, but I want to make sure we got it out there because we want to respect Mr. Kessler and sending that statement to the show, and we are very thankful for his contribution to this show. And he says he's sorry he wasn't able to make the show, but he was pretty much busy. But I want to read a statement about the litigation that is not being talked about, and we'll dig into both of these cases next week. Jeffrey Kessler basically stated, and we'll talk about this a little bit more next week. He stated, quote unquote, "Our suit is designed to change the system in which billions of dollars are earned in the top level of men's basketball and football. But a school would be punished if it even tried to provide extra health insurance, trust funds, or other financial benefits to those athletes who contribute to generating all of those revenues. These are big businesses seeking to hide behind a label of quote-unquote amateurism that bears no resemblance of reality. The players are entitled to the same antitrust protections that apply in all other industries." It's that simple, people. Thank you guys for so much for joining us once again on Suit Up. I have a list of people to thank that is as long as my arm. I thank for Myron Metcalf for joining us. I thank so much for Joe Sippert for joining us. I thank so much to Christy Dosh for joining us. I thank you so much for Steve Fanara for joining us. Man, we had some Joel Corey for joining us. And did I leave anybody out? Absolutely. Morgan Campbell for joining me. So just thank you so much, everyone, for joining me and just really contributing to a really great discussion. And we're going to be continuing that more and more each week on Suit Up. Until I see you next Tuesday, make sure brush your shoulders off, check your timepiece, make sure everything is ironed very well, and then just go ahead and suit up.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.
As long as I got my suit and tie. I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman.
You are looking at the best closer the city has ever seen.
Closer, huh? Baseball?
Attorney, I close situations.
Chicago's very own. I've seen him on Skull Candy. I've seen him on pizza boxes. I've seen him on Adidas. We all know that Derrick Rose is a marketable figure. But it doesn't mean anything if he cannot step on the court. So now what do you have?
Suit Up every Tuesday, 8 to 10 p.m. Pace Sports Network, Chicagoland Sports Radio.